So we start off with the chapter after the aftermath of Buddha and Hajin clash towards each other, and we see that Buddha's scythe is actually being stuck on Hajin's arm because Hajin was able to manage to transform his arm into a scale-like shield, so that way his arm won't be able to cut off. And we see Buddha actually very shocked by it because in the last second of the clash, Buddha thought that he actually got Hajin, but Buddha was able to control himself and got himself together in a quick second, and he was able to have this smirk like, okay, I got something up my sleeve, or this is not a big deal. And that pretty much ticked off Hajin to the point where Hajin pushed off Buddha and start just throwing some blows at him, while Buddha was able enough to block Hajin's attacks with his scythe. And so we see that Hajin, he's actually surprised that Buddha was able to put damage to his arm. And you see that half of Hajin's arm was being cut off. And so he's just wondering, like, how did Buddha was able to enough to get the amount of strength that he has now? Because before he didn't have this strength. So he's just like, where is this power coming from? Because he's just staring at Buddha, and Buddha's just standing there with this smirk on his face. And then so Buddha was taunting Hajin, saying that, what, are you scared? Are you weak? And we see Hajin was able to heal his body. And then that triggered Hajin this full-blown rage, because we get more backstory and more understanding of Hajin as a character. Because during the backstory of Hajin, we saw that Hajin has an issue with his body. Because with his previous body, he was very unstable to hold the power he had in his original body, because with his new body is able to withstand and to hold the power that he has. So with his past self, that, like I speculated in the last review, that it just seems like the original Hajin, he wasn't unable to hold his own body just due to the amount of the power that he has. So now with this new body that he's able to fuse with Zero and everything, he's able to stable himself to the point where he can be more powerful and more able enough to control his abilities, and where his body won't give up on him. But since Buddha starts to insult him and saying that you're weak and you're being scared and everything else, that triggered Hajin to the point where Hajin was in this full-blown rage. But luckily Hajin was able to catch himself, because he kind of saw what Buddha was trying to do. Buddha was trying to psych him out mentally, but that didn't really work. And then so while the fight continues, we start to see Hajin's arm, the one that was like chopped off, almost halfway chopped off, it started to break down, and Hajin's trying to regenerate as much as he can, but he couldn't. So it just seems like Buddha's insult was able enough to work at this moment. And then so we start to see Hajin rip off his arm, form his arm into a sword. And that's where the fight continues. We're at the point where Buddha, he was trying to hold his composure, because Hajin was going crazy at this moment, because Hajin felt insulted. And on top of that, you push Hajin to the limits. And it came to the point where the other gods like Zeus, Hades, Ares, all this other stuff, they were talking about the fight, and they were talking about Buddha and how he's handling the situation and everything that Buddha has done. But Hades, he's loving it, because he's just like, look at Buddha's eyes. Buddha's eyes is not in the will of giving up. This man still wants to continue to fight. And then so this fight is very, very entertaining to the point where, you know, Hades, he's loving this. And then while the fight is also continues, because there's points of time during this battle that it seems like Hajin was getting the upper hand. And then we see Beelzebub, man, he is just eating his apple, just watching his experiments, succeeding his expectations and everything. And he's just like, oh, this is so delightful. Beelzebub is just very, very evil at this point. And I just kind of like how his character is very more fancy, but also too, he just kind of likes to be like, okay, like, yeah, I'm making this destructions, and he's admiring his own creations on what it's doing. So while the battle continues, we see that Buddha, he's still able to hold on his own. He's not willing to give up until Hajin, he was able enough to break Buddha's bell staff. Yes, he was able enough to break Buddha's bell staff, and we see Buddha just flying across the stage, and half of his clothes is just being ripped off as well. Things that Buddha is done at this moment in time, everyone's freaking out. Everyone is just like, oh my gosh. You see the half of humanity, they're just like crying. They're just like, Buddha, please don't give up. Please don't give up. You see Brahilda, she's yelling out for Buddha. And then while Buddha is on the floor, he starts to have like this vision, and he sees Zero, and he sees the spirit of Zero having his back and willing enough to fuse with him. And then so we see Buddha actually getting up, and while he's getting up, he still has the will to fight, and everyone is cheering for him as humanity. And then so while they're cheering for him, we see like a silhouette of Buddha and Zero like forming together, and we see Buddha was able to transform into pieces of his bell staff into this sword. And Hajin is being pissed at this moment in time because he's just like, what is happening? How is this possible? And then we see all of the 7 gods of fortunes behind Buddha, giving him this power up, and we see Buddha like transform. And then so Buddha, he's like ready, and he's not giving up. And then so while this battle's continuously, everyone from like Brahilda to humanity, they're just cheering on Buddha. And then we see Hajin is being pissed off at this moment in time because, you know, everything is not going in his way. So we see both of them two, or they're about to go ahead and clash, and then that's just the end of this chapter. But this was a very good chapter, and I really did like the whole concept of how Buddha was able to maintain his cool even though the whole state was in dire need, and it seems like Hajin was going to win. But I also find it really funny how, you know, the spirit of Zero was able enough to morph and help Buddha get a power boost, so that way he's able to take out Hajin or be in the same level as Hajin. And it's kind of funny too to actually see that my prediction was right from the last review that I did, where I did predicted that during the backstory of Hajin, how his body seems to be unstable, and it was apparently came true. So that was a pretty cool thing that like I was actually very proud of myself for making that prediction. It actually came true. But other than that, let me know down in the comment section how you guys feel about this chapter. What's your guys' favorite moments? And are you guys ready for chapter 53, which is going to drop to, and we already know the outcome that's going to happen. So, but other than that, this is Monotone Man. If you guys do like the video, please give it a like, subscribe, and always remember, always be decent and be safe.